I still remember the smell. It clung to my clothes, to my hair, to every pore of my skin, a suffocating mix of chlorine, mud, and human bodies decaying. I had walked through many hospitals, many refugee camps in my career as a doctor, but nowhere else had I ever felt the stench of life and death so terrifyingly blended as in Haiti, late 2010. After the devastating earthquake and the relentless rains, cholera erupted like an invisible beast. It crept into every shelter, swallowing bodies shriveled from dehydration, leaving behind only skin stretched over bone and the echoes of groans. Inside the makeshift treatment area, a row of canvas tents hastily pitched on swampy ground. The air was filled with coughing, retching, and the cries of children. People lay pressed together on wooden cots, some unable to wipe away the vomit before another convulsion seized them. Every step I took seemed dragged down by hundreds of eyes that were desperate, pleading, demanding. I was exhausted after countless shifts. My hands trembled. The rubber gloves I wore had already turned a sickly yellow from endless scrubbing in chlorine. I couldn't even remember the last time I had closed my eyes to rest, but there was no choice. None of us had a choice. Outside the tents, the rain lashed down onto the muddy ground, swirling into a dirty soup. Children stumbled through it, slipping, sitting in puddles to cry, while their emaciated mothers tried to pull them up, clutching plastic buckets in the other hand to catch what little treated water there was. A boy of barely 4, his eyes sunken and hollow, sat with his knees pulled tight to his chest, staring at me through the tarp, and that gaze haunted me through the entire night. I once believed that when I put on the white coat, all I needed was knowledge, skill, and determination. But Haiti taught me a bitter lesson. Medicine has limits. Many times, the only thing I could do was hold a trembling hand until it slowly grew cold, and death never waits. That afternoon, I was bent over, trying to place an IV line in a man dying of severe dehydration. He was nothing but skin and bone, his lips cracked, shriveled like dry leaves. I had tried 3 times, but each vein collapsed, refusing to hold. I clenched my teeth, pushed harder, and finally the needle slid in. The man let out a faint groan, then slipped into unconsciousness. I looked up and saw the local nurse shake her head, tears brimming. We both knew he wouldn't make it. At that moment, heavy footsteps sounded outside the tent, followed by the sharp thud of a rifle butt against rubber boots. I lifted my head. 2 soldiers entered. Their uniforms were faded, shoulders streaked with mud, rifles gripped tightly in their hands. They stormed into the tent, thickening an atmosphere already suffocating. Some patients stirred, shrinking back in fear. A Haitian nurse let out a quiet sigh, as if she already knew what was coming. Between the 2 soldiers was a man. They dragged him by the arms, his head slumped, his legs dragging through the mud. Iron cuffs bound his wrists, the chains clattering with every step. His face was bruised, lips split, one cheek crusted with dried blood. His left foot was grotesquely swollen, the ankle twisted and clearly broken. With each step, he hissed faintly through clenched teeth, but he did not cry out. A ripple of murmurs swept through the tent. Whispers spread. Prisoner, murderer, monster. I saw eyes filled with both hatred and curiosity all turned toward him. The soldier in front jerked his chin, his voice cold. "Doctor, this is a criminal. Fix him, make him walk again." He spoke in a rough mix of French and Creole, just clear enough for me to understand. I froze for a moment, my heart pounding. I was used to choosing who could be saved and who could not. In disaster, such choices were inevitable, but this time felt different. The man raised his head, and I met his eyes. They were clouded with exhaustion, yet deep inside flickered a light, not the gleam of a murderer, as the whispers claimed, but the fragile light of a human being desperately clinging to life. In those eyes there was fury, humiliation, but also thirst for water, for breath, for the chance to see tomorrow. I swallowed hard. Before me stood 2 opposing images, a murderer in chains and a patient with a shattered ankle, bleeding, trembling with pain. I knew which image I had to choose. I was a doctor. I signaled the nurse to bring bandages and saline. The soldier sneered, curling his lip, as if he couldn't believe I would touch that man. But I knelt down, my hands pressing against the swollen ankle. It radiated heat, grotesquely deformed. I drew in a breath and began examining it. The air inside the tent grew heavier. Some patients turned their faces away, unwilling to watch. Others stared intently. I heard someone whisper in Creole, a voice dripping with resentment. I tightened the cloth bandage, bracing the broken joint. The man hissed through his teeth, sweat breaking out across his brow, but he stayed silent. I looked at him again. His lips were cracked, his shirt stained with blood. I gestured to a nurse. Water. I held the bottle of water to his cracked lips. The prisoner trembled as he swallowed each gulp, his throat rising and falling like a taut cord. He said nothing. Only his eyes remained fixed on me, as if trying to carve this moment into memory. That night, sitting slumped in the corner of the tent, my back against the damp canvas wall, I heard the clinking of iron chains echo in my head, mingling with the groans of patients. I knew his presence had brought something heavier than cholera into this camp. Prejudice, fear, and a question I could not silence inside myself. Was he truly a murderer? Or just a man shackled by fate? I thought I had grown used to the screams in this place, the convulsions of children, the wails of parents, the cries of patients calling out to God. But that evening, one scream froze the entire overcrowded tent in place. A boy, around 8 years old, his black eyes hollow and vacant, collapsed in the middle of the cots. He was severely dehydrated, his body nothing but skin stretched over bones, his lips tinged purple. Dark red fluid spilled from his mouth and from below, an advanced complication of cholera that we had almost no means left to control. I watched him shiver, then his whole body convulsed violently. "Blood!" the local nurse cried out in French. "He's hemorrhaging. He needs a transfusion now." I rushed forward, dropping to my knees beside the cot. His tiny hand was clenched, his skin ice cold. I knew. Without a transfusion, he would die within hours, perhaps minutes. I looked up, my voice raw. "His blood type?" The interpreter answered, "O negative." My heart sank. In a chaotic refugee camp like this, finding the right blood type was nearly impossible. We had already exhausted the last of the donated blood bags a week earlier. I turned to the international medical team. Everyone shook their heads. No one had O. My own blood was type A. I looked at the boy, his eyes glazing over, eyelids drooping, his breaths faltering like a thread about to snap. In that moment, I felt helplessness crush my chest. I had witnessed many deaths, but facing a child, an orphan, abandoned in the middle of an epidemic, death felt more merciless than ever. I saw his tiny hand reaching weakly, as if trying to grasp the air, and I wondered, would anyone even remember his name, or would he become just another nameless body buried hastily in the mud? Then came a sound behind me, the clink of chains. I turned. The prisoner, he was sitting against the wall, his broken ankle freshly bandaged. His face was bruised, sweat dripping down his temple, but his eyes were fixed on the boy, and then he spoke, his voice hoarse, broken. "My blood type. Oh, negative." The tent seemed to choke on silence. The nurse dressing his wound froze. A guard standing nearby burst into mocking laughter. "Him? The blood of a murderer for a child? Are you all insane?" The prisoner raised his shackled arm, holding it up for all to see. His eyes met mine, steady, cold, but lined with sorrow. "If I am already condemned as a man about to die, then let my blood save a life." Those words fell into the air thick with chlorine and blood, and the entire tent fell silent. I could hear my heart pounding. There was something in his voice, not a plea, but an offering, a raw truth that left everyone stunned. Inside me, a fierce battle raged. I was a doctor. My principle was to save lives at any cost, but to transfuse blood from a prisoner, a man branded by the camp as a murderer, that could ignite the fury of the crowd. I felt their eyes on him, fearful, disgusted, doubtful. A few patients whispered, "The blood of a killer." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain steady. "If we don't transfuse, the boy will die." No one answered. The rain drummed on the canvas roof like the ticking of a clock counting down. I turned and gave the nurse a nod. "Prepare the instruments." We pulled a wooden chair into the center of the tent. The prisoner was helped onto it, his wrists still bound in iron. I took the needle, cleaned the vein. My hand trembled as it touched his sun-darkened, calloused skin, but he didn't flinch. He only looked at me and gave a slight nod, as if to say, "Do it." When the needle pierced, He closed his eyes, lips pressed tight. Dark red blood flowed into the tube, then into the makeshift bag, ready for the boy. In the dim yellow light of the generator's bulb, I watched that blood, amid the stench of death in the camp, glow with the faint shimmer of hope. The child was fitted with the transfusion line, the blood trickling into his frail body. The air grew suffocatingly still. Everyone, patients, nurses, guards, stood watching. Some whispered prayers, some doubted, but not one person looked away. I watched the clock, each minute dragging by like a century. At first the boy was barely breathing, his lips dark purple. But then, after about 20 minutes, I saw his eyelids flicker. His chest rose and fell more evenly. A quiet sigh of relief escaped the nurse beside me. "The boy is alive," I whispered, my own voice trembling. A wave of murmurs swept through the tent. Some people broke into tears, others raised trembling hands to make the sign of the cross. I turned to the prisoner. His face was pale from blood loss, sweat soaking through his torn collar, yet his eyes, once hardened with fury, now seemed softer, glimmering as if some of the darkness had been washed away. He looked at the boy, the corner of his lips curling into a weary smile, before his head sagged forward. I signaled to remove the needle, to dress the puncture. His hand trembled, the chains clattering once more. Red welts circled his wrists. That day, the rain fell without pause, soaking into the earth until the mud clung heavy to every step. I stepped outside the main tent, searching for air, but the entire camp hung thick with the now familiar scent of chlorine. These days, patients arrived faster and left this world even faster. We no longer had the time to remember every name. Not long after, the guards came. They entered the tent, rifles slung, faces stern. No shouting, no threats, just a finger pointing toward him. "It's time." The chains rattled again, heavy and harsh among the groans of the sick. The man rose unsteadily, limping toward them. No patient dared to speak. The entire tent was hushed. I could hear only the rain hammering against the canvas roof and the drip of IV fluid. In that silence, I noticed the blind old man tilt his face toward us, and the orphan boy shivering in the corner, his eyes wide open. But no words were spoken. The soldier stepped forward, unlocked the irons, only to cuff his hands in front. The man struggled to stand, limping as they led him away. At the entrance, he paused for half a second. He turned his head toward me and the nurse. No smile, no thank you, just a fleeting look. Yet in that look I understood. He knew that at least someone had seen him as human. Then he disappeared beyond the flap. The tent fell back into its rhythm, coughing, prayers, the patter of rain, as if nothing had ever happened. I sank into a chair, drained. The nurse sat quietly too, her fingers entwined. We both understood there are things beyond the reach of medicine, beyond compassion itself. We could drip fluids, bind wounds, even listen. But against law and power, we were only shadows. Sometimes what people do for one another, a bottle of water, a drop of blood, a single glance, matters more than any sentence. I looked around. Patients still waiting, skeletal arms reaching for a sip of water. The work went on, like a machine that allowed no one to stop. As for his fate, I would never know.